Hello class! Welcome to Notes 2.1 Simplifying Fractions. Notice our standard for today is grade 6 in S 2.4, and that is because this is a review of 6th grade. Our objective today is to determine the GCF and reduce the fractions. Our vocabulary: fraction, a number in the form a over b, where a is the numerator, b is the denominator. Simplest form, a fraction where the numerator and the denominator whose only common factor is 1, so it is reduced as far as it can go. And equivalent fractions, fractions that represent the same number and have the same simplest form. Okay, real quick notes today. Let's go ahead and go on to teacher example. Teacher example 1, write the fraction's simplest form. Now, you've done this a lot, and one way is to divide them both by the same number. The trouble is sometimes you don't know what the best number is, and you end up doing a lot of division. I'm going to show you another option. You can use either, whichever you prefer. So this option is using prime factorization. So what we're going to do is we're going to write each number out in primes. So if I were to break down 24, I could say, well, 24 is made of 6 and 4. And then break down 6. 6 is made up of 2 and 3. And 4 is made up of 2 and 2. I'll do the same thing with 132. And when I write out using primes, I've got this. So notice I've got my primes in order from least to greatest. And all I did was use a factor tree to find these primes. Okay? Remember, a prime number is a number whose only factors are itself and 1. Okay? The next thing I want to do is actually cross out the matching numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and do so now. Okay, now you'll notice that I crossed out the 2's because they're matching, one on the top, one on the bottom, one in the numerator, one in the denominator. Another set of 2's here. We have a third 2 up here in the numerator, but notice there isn't another 2 in the denominator, so we have to leave that one. And then we can cross out our 3's as well. Notice the 11 stays because it doesn't have a buddy in the numerator. So now I simply multiply together all my numerators, which in this case I only have 2, and all my denominators, which in this case I only have 11, and there I have the fraction in simplest form. So again, I could have divided both the numerator and the denominator by 12 if I had known that they both went into there. But if I don't know that, it might be easier to write it out. Okay, you can do whichever method you prefer. Teacher example 2, tell whether the fractions 4/5 and 28/35 are equivalent, which means they're both going to have the same simplest form. They can both reduce to the same number. So the way we want to do that is simply reduce them both, simplify them down to their simplest form. Okay, starting with 4/5, we want to look for numbers that can go into both of them, or I can write them out using prime factorization. 4 is simply 2 times 2, and 5 is simply 5. They don't have any common factors, so 4/5 is already in simplest form. 28/35, again, I can write them out using the prime factors, or I can simply divide them both by the same number. In this case, if you take a look here, I notice they're both divisible by 7. So I'm going to go ahead and divide them both by 7 and I end up with 4/5. Since both these fractions have the same simplest form, 4/5 and 4/5, you would say yes, the fractions are equivalent. Okay, now I'm going to have you go ahead and try some out on your own. Go ahead and do these 7 problems. The first 2 ask you to write the fraction in simplest form, which means reduce it as much as possible. If you choose, you can write it out using prime factorization, or you can simply divide both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. Either will work. You'll get the same answer both ways. The second part, write the 2 fractions that are equivalent to the given fraction. There are millions and billions of fractions that are equivalent. Okay, I'm going to show you an example of 2 that are close to these fractions that I don't have to do much work for. But remember, you may not have exactly the same answers. So go ahead, pause your video, restart it when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, let's take a look at our answers here. This one here, I notice they're both divisible by 4, and I end up with simplest form is 2/33. Here, I also notice they're both divisible by 4, and end up with 12/33. Final problem, again, both of them are divisible by 4, and end up with 13/33. So I chose to simply divide them both by the same amount since it was fairly easy for me. If it's not, write it out using prime factorization. Remember, you'll get the same answer. Here, starting with problem number 4, writing 2 fractions that are equivalent to the given fraction. I'm going to go ahead and divide them both by 7 and multiply them both by 2. So dividing both by 7, I end up with 1/3. Multiplying both of these by 2, I end up with 14/42. Both of those are equivalent to the original fraction. 8/20, again, I'm going to divide them both by 4 this time and multiply them both by 2. So again, I have two equivalent fractions. The simplest form for all the fractions is 2/5. Problem number 6, I'm going to divide them different ways. First, I'm going to divide them both by 2, so I get 9/12. Going back to my original fraction, I've decided to divide them both by 6 this time, and I end up with 3/4. Again, all three of these fractions are equivalent. Their simplest form is 3/4. Number 7, I'm going to divide them both by 2 and multiply them both by 2. So here I have 5/8 and 20/32. That is the simplest form. It would be 5/8. Okay, just a reminder on here, make sure you've written down all the problems and all the answers. Make sure you've numbered your problems 1 through 7 and shown any and all work that you did. When you're finished, you're ready to go on to the quiz. Okay, and finally we arrive at the quiz, quiz 2.1, write the fraction in simplest form. Notice on each of these problems, I have used a forward slash, That is the button that's found next to the shift button, or if you're on an iPad, it's right underneath the number 1 on that number screen. You want to make sure that you use that, not a regular fraction bar. Don't write the numbers on top of each other, it will mark you wrong. You need to write it exactly the same way I have. Also, if your answer does end up being negative, you want to use that negative sign without a space, so you'd write it just like I did. So copy it right off there, do those 3 problems, you want to simplify them all the way, you should not have any spaces in your answer. A reminder, these quiz questions need to be written on your notes as well as your answers. Okay, have a great day.